Hey, hey, hey. Hopefully everybody will see this. I am going live on my stream here. Hope you can see it. I am here today just trying to test that out and also to answer a question. What I wish I knew when I started my career as a developer. So we'll get started here in a second. We'll take a look here. So, yep. So we're just getting started here, just seeing how this works. And I will begin here in just 1 minute. Yep, to see how this works. All right, there's a few things I wish I knew when I started my career as a web developer. Definitely so I always get this question every now and then is what I wish I knew when I started my career as a web developer. And there's a few things I wish I knew. For one, I wish I knew how much work it was going to actually take to be a developer. There's so much I didn't know when I started, from all the hundreds of different frameworks that you really should probably at least heard of, for all the way you need to build new stuff, to build your apps. I really underestimated the amount of work that it took to get everything working. So hey everybody, that's come on. This is my first live stream, so I'm just trying to test it out. Just talking about things that I wish I knew when I started my career as a web developer. Definitely another thing I wish I knew was whiteboarding interviews, coding interviews. I wish I knew exactly how much work that would take. When I first got my first interview, I didn't realize that I should know whiteboarding interview problems, so I just kind of went in there blind, and that really was a problem. I have gone to interviews where there wasn't any kind of that type of whiteboarding interviews. It was more of a take-home test, but I definitely wasn't prepared as much as I should have been when I started. All right, so hello everybody. Just kind of getting used to this here. All right, so another thing what I wish I knew when I started my career as a developer is the open source community. I really wish I would have gotten into that before I started. I didn't have any clue that there was this large community and all these open source projects that I could work on and really help and bring up my skills. So, hey, what's up, Edson? So that is something that I had no idea there was out there. And I think if I would have known that there was a really great community out there, then I would have been able to kind of use that to become better at my skills of what I was doing. So that is just a few things I wish I knew when I started my career as a developer. Of course, when I started, I didn't realize there was all these boot camps out there, and there's just so many ways to learn. I thought particularly that you had to, that a formal education was the only way, but really there's so many different ways to learn how to program and start your career off. And that is something that I got used to as I was learning more and more. I wish I would have kind of learned a little bit more of those resources. So I think that would help out a little bit. And that's kind of a few things I'll open it up. Do you guys have any questions? Just leave a message in the chat if you do. So how is web developer careers required specific age? So that's a good question. There's really, for age-wise, really, there's no age requirement. There's definitely people that came right out of high school that got right into web development, became a programmer. Max Stoiber, if you don't know his story, he's a big part of the React community. He's only 20 years old, and he skipped college, and he has a pretty good career as a software developer now. He talks at a lot of different conferences. And then there's people like me. I'm a little bit older, and I actually started a little bit not right out of high school. I went to college, and then out of college I got into development and programming. But there's no age limit, and if you're older, you certainly can get right into it. There's people starting to learn how to program when they're 30, when they're 35, when they're 40. So there's really no age limit. It's just how much you're willing to work for it and how much you're willing to try to really to get there, I suppose. So another good question I always sometimes get is, what is a good first programming language to start off with? So really, this is kind of some beginner questions I get every now and then, but I can talk about more advanced stuff if you guys have questions. But definitely Python, Ruby on Rails are really important. Ruby is a great language to start off when just learning. I know MIT, their beginning course, they start off with Python. When I started off, I learned C++, but I mean, your mileage may vary. Some people think that's a really good language to start off with. Some people not so much. You kind of learn about pointers and a lot of higher level stuff if you go C and C++. On the other hand, Python is a great first language to start with. And then I would skip JavaScript until you at least learn some of the basics of conditionals and loops and a little bit of algorithms, just because there's a lot of different ways to do things in JavaScript, so you could learn the wrong ways. I mean, there's a book called JavaScript, The Good Parts, because there is quite a bit of the bad parts of JavaScript. So those are a few things if you want to learn. So those are a few good first programming languages. Yeah, Bootstrap. Someone mentioned Bootstrap, and Edson mentioned Bootstrap in the comments. It's definitely important. So kind of when you're starting web development, some of the basics that you always learn and you always hear about are jQuery and Bootstrap, especially if you're not inclined with design and you're not really great at CSS. Bootstrap's a good first library to learn, just to try to get an idea of how to put together a website. And I think even today, I think it's great. You can to get into there just to kind of get an idea. Of course, as you get out there in the real world, you'll notice that people don't use that as much. A lot of people are using different libraries and Flexbox and a bunch of other things to create it. And you really need to get back to the basics and learn CSS if you don't know what it is and how to work it. But when you see it, when you get out there too, you'll notice that there is a difference between a developer and a designer. So, and if you're a full stack developer, a lot of times you still have a designer to help you with the look and feel of the web page, especially a lot of small agencies, they even have a designer, and larger agencies will break up even between the people that do HTML and the people that do CSS and design. So it just depends on what you're more interested in when you get out there. So I have a few other questions that I have written down here. Eloquent JavaScript, yeah, that's an excellent JavaScript book. I would recommend it. There's a few. I mentioned about JavaScript, the good parts. That's a little bit older, but Eloquent JavaScript, and I'll think of a few others. I'll put them in the comments below if I can remember them. Coding, yeah, there's a few out there. I just gotta remember off the top of my head what they are. So another question I sometimes get is, how did you teach yourself to code? So I definitely went the more formal education. I went to college and got a degree in computer science. But even before then, I was hacking away at websites, doing a lot of PHP, HTML, and just JavaScript, and just renting books from the library that I could to try to be able to learn programming and try to become a better programmer. But if I had to do it nowadays, I would definitely look at Free Code Camp. Getting a community behind you is extremely important. Something like Newbie Coder Warehouse, I would recommend. They're a Facebook group. I'm active in there a lot. It's a kind of a community of people helping each other learn programming, and definitely, just using all those free sources. And if you have a little bit more money, actually Udemy has some great courses. I have a link in the description below. You can get any course free for $10 for this week, when they're normally like $190. Code School, Code Academy, places like that would be great for starts. So how long did it take for JavaScript to sink in for you? I'm getting better with it, but still can build from scratch what is expected. You don't know JavaScript is a good one? Yep. They're definitely, I've heard it. There's a whole series of free JavaScript books. I gotta look them up, but you can get a whole series of free JavaScript books, and there's a lot of free resources out there. Oh, hey, what's up, God, in the chat? So how long did it take for me to sink in? It definitely took a while. So you can easily, like within, I don't know, just a few days, you can pretty much get the basics of JavaScript, get loops, get just some basic algorithms, arrays, things like that. I mean, those are really, really easy and simple, and those just take a few days. But the more difficult parts you'll get when you start looking more at different objects, prototypical inheritance, and then when you start getting deeper, diving into the language, you'll definitely see more complexity. And that's where it's a good time. It's a good idea to just deep dive into some blogs, some books, and to really understand how JavaScript works. And that could take definitely a while. And it's the best thing to do, of course, is if you do this for your job or for your living or you're a freelancer, then you're going to get exposed to this every single day, and it's going to definitely sink in more and more. And even better if you're using JavaScript in the front end with a single page application framework like Ember or Vue or React or Angular. And then you're actually, if you're writing it on the back end using Node.js, then you're kind of even getting more exposure to it, because of course JavaScript and Node uses the V8 engine, and you're writing basically JavaScript in the back end. I don't know. Let me see here. I'll have to look it up later, but yeah, there's definitely some really good books and resources on that. So one really cool I wanted to talk to you guys about. If you haven't seen the previous video, I did one on GlimmerJS, and so the good people who created Ember and Ember CLI, which is a single page application framework, they created a smaller library. It's a component UI library. It's a component no problem, Alan. It's a component UI library that's used specifically for smaller applications. It's really fast. You can use it for like widgets, or you can use it for web components if you're really into what's up the pike in web components in ES 2016. And it's really competing against the likes of Vue and other frameworks, kind of like React. It's really in the early days, so the library, it's not a framework. The library for GlimmerJS is really easy to get up and running, but you're kind of missing, you are missing like the router, and you are missing kind of the unification of what's inside the Ember side, so you can't use add-ons and things like that. So, but it's definitely something you can check out. I created a whole app. It was really simple. With the Ember CLI build tools, you can just create a Glimmer app real quickly, and I was able to create something like in a half hour. And it's when I built it and it got built in production, it was just a really tiny app. I don't know, it was like 30K. So if you are like me and you hear about Angular 2 or Angular 4, or you're hearing about Ember, and you're like, well, these are like monolithic big frameworks, and I want something really small to do something specific, and I want to kind of take pieces of different things and put them together, kind of like you do in React, then GlimmerJS would be great for you to take a look at. So I just wanted to mention that. Hey, what's up, guys? Granez, John. So another question I got, advice on moving from a junior entry-level position to a regular one? So junior entry-level, so I mean, everybody has to start somewhere. So if you're starting as a junior developer, you already have a heads up from a lot of people that don't have a job at all. So you have to just put in the time. And it's really between a junior developer and senior developer. I mean, every business has a different rubric of what qualifies as a senior developer and a junior developer. And it's not unheard of some people going from like 1 year of experience as a junior developer and then somehow they're a senior developer right afterwards. And that would be because maybe they are getting into the more advanced things. Maybe they're full stack, so they're not just looking at the front end, but they're also doing stuff in the back end. Maybe they're doing database stuff too at the same time. So it's really hard to like figure out on how to move from one to the other. It just depends. It's almost like a mindset and where you work at, what they consider to be a senior developer and what they want you to do. I've seen people that have been, and it doesn't always have to be experience. I've seen people that have worked 5 years the same job and are still considered junior, because it's the difference between being 5 years of experience or 5 years of 1 year of experience. So if you're just repeating the same mistakes and doing the same thing, you can work at a job for 5 years and still be considered a junior developer. So I would say look at what your job is, what they have the qualification to be a senior developer. In general, I would say you have to be full stack. If it's like a web development environment, or at least you have to kind of know whatever language or framework you're in inside and out. You have to be able to kind of break it apart, go beyond the limitations of what you're doing. So things like that, for definitely. So CSS, I kind of touched on this before. So when you're learning, as a web developer, depends on the agency you work for or the business. So some places you have to know some CSS at any time. So you're going to have to know, to be a web developer in the industry, you're going to have to at least know some basics of CSS. You're not going to need to be able to take Photoshop files and necessarily, or Sketch files, which is pretty much the standard, and then create a web app or web page from it necessarily. But you're going to need to be able to at least take some input from the designer and to make changes and updates on it. Depending on where you work, the design and CSS might be done by different people than who do the front end or HTML or back end. So I'd say learn some basics, but if that's the route you want to go, just go deep dive into it. And look at the requirements for any jobs you're applying at, because they may require you to have a deep knowledge of CSS, and that might not be the right job for you. I don't know CSS inside and out myself. I can get around, but that's something I need to learn more of too. All right, so you've been coding 2 weeks, just started with JavaScript or Free Code Camp. In your opinion, as far as learning goes, should I just stick with Free Code Camp or expand while I'm doing Free Code Camp, coding from scratch, etc.? So congratulations, God, in the chat, for starting your journey learning JavaScript and programming, even though it's just been 2 weeks. And definitely, my friend Dylan from Coding Tutorials 360 is really, really good at Free Code Camp tutorials. He's done a ton of them, and that's how he started, really. He said he just did tons of tutorials. He was able to take that knowledge, and then he actually did a YouTube channel and shared what he learned, and he was able to get the job he has at now. So I'd say, you should stick with free code cam. Just keep learning as much as you can. But eventually, of course, you're going to hit a point where it's just not quite enough. So that's when you want to start really looking more advanced topics. Of course, my idea is every time you try to learn something, you have the 70-30 rule, which is 70% learning and, or excuse me, 30% learning, 30% learning and 70% working and doing something. So as long as, even if you're doing these free code camp tutorials, and some of them require you to create, I think, code pens for them, which are, it's a website where you can create your application. I would still say try to go beyond that. Try to spend more time actually creating stuff that you can put out in the world. Sign up for Heroku. It's absolutely free, or GitHub Pages, and start putting up every week. Every week, just put up a new web page of something you learned. Or what I did was I created a blog, and every time I learned something, I put some new post on my blog. So good luck. So another question, Kron, is I'm a student about to graduate in web dev. Once again, congratulations. That's awesome. Any tips on what I should know or learn more in depth if I'm trying to become a PHP developer? So I'm wondering where you're graduating from in web development. Is this like a coding boot camp, or are you talking about community college, or are you going to a 4-year college? That's kind of interesting. But as for a PHP developer, there's probably 2 frameworks you want to learn or look at. If you probably already know them, Laravel and Cake. I in my last video, I said if you're learning PHP, you should learn Cake, and then I got a lot of people saying, no, Cake is outdated. Everybody's using Laravel. I'm not a PHP developer, but that's the 2 ones that people seem to say you really need to know. And PHP is great. I mean, if you're going in the WordPress ecosystem, there's a lot of need for WordPress developers. I would even try to see if I could go and create my own open source WordPress plugin, things like that. So that's what I would do there. Another question, how much should I know before applying for jobs? That I did a video on this, so you've definitely... my philosophy is once you start learning programming, web development, is the same time you should start applying for places. And I know a lot of people think that that's really scary, and you have very, it's difficult, but I think you should just start getting your name out there, and you need to position yourself as someone that's going to work really, really hard. You're going to get a pay cut because you're going to get a pay cut because you're going to be brand new developer, but you want to look for an employer that is looking for you, for someone with some potential, I should say. So you need to show them you have potential, and hopefully, if you live in a larger city, there might be an agency you can work for, or maybe even go on Craigslist and take a look at some jobs that are available. Maybe try to apply for some on there, especially if it's from smaller companies or individuals. You have a better chance of getting them. If it's you can even look on Craigslist for companies that are looking for work, and you could try to contact them to see maybe you can work for them part-time, or you can get some kind of mentorship from them. So there's a lot of choices, but I would say just start looking right away, within the first few weeks. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up here in a minute. It's a little bit noise in the background, but let me see if I can do one more. So I'm reading here. Okay, so I got a question about technical blog. So, hey, Eric, I'm considering starting from Oscar. By the way, thanks for joining, Oscar and Terrence, by the way. I appreciate you joining in. So I'm considering starting a web dev bootcamp with my college, and I want to start a technical blog on it. Do you have any tips making the blog? That's awesome. Yeah, in fact, most boot camps you go to, it's one of the requirements is for you to join a web to create a blog, that is, I should say. I talked to Nick Spinoza, who took the bootcamp from Hack Reactor, and that's one of the things they encouraged them during the program was to create a blog and to do a little bit of personal branding, get your name out there. Nick did really well. He's a really smart guy. He's able to get a job pretty quickly out of the boot camp. So, of course, right now WordPress is really popular. So if you don't want to deep dive into like trying to build the blog from yourself, just grab a WordPress site. You can even get a free one hosted on WordPress.org. I think it's WordPress.com. WordPress.com, that is. And you can pay even extra. I would at least get your domain name. So either your first name, middle initial, last name, or first name, last name. So try to get your name as domain name. And set up your email addresses so you have your first name at yourdomainname.com. It just looks a little bit more professional when you're trying to look for jobs. And then I would center your blog about what you're learning during the bootcamp. So I would spend like an hour or two every day or two and just write an article on what you learned and try to go a little bit beyond the basics and then start doing that. And you'll notice, and with blogging, like anything else, you're going to find out that you're going to be talking to no one for a long time. So you may want to try to get on Twitter, on Facebook, try to promote your posts. That way you can get a little bit more people watching or reading your blogs. You can also try Medium. I would still have a domain name on your website with your blog, but I would cross-post some of your more popular blogs on Medium and see if you can get some virality there. I use Ghost, which is a great blogging platform too. I got it hosted. It's pretty inexpensive. So I would try to do that. Of course, this is a huge topic with blogging. Try to stay consistent throughout. So maybe a post a week when you're starting, and use it more for yourself instead of publicity. So you can kind of go over what you're learning and help you kind of retain that. And then at some point, you'd also want to create a portfolio site underneath your domain as well. And okay, this is the last question. WordPress or Wix, could they influence as a web developer? Well, are you asking? I think Eli, thanks for joining the chat here. WordPress or Wix? It depends on... Well, I don't use Wix. I would stay away from Wix. I would definitely stick with WordPress if you had a choice between the two. There's just so many thousands of plugins that you can use. It has a great open source community, and you can buy themes everywhere, theme forests. So if you're just starting out with blogging, or you just want to start creating a portfolio site, I would go with WordPress and then kind of design it yourself to make it look really, really, really good. Oh, some people are telling me to stop. I don't know why someone would tell you to stop if you mean stop working on WordPress. If you mean WordPress is a great platform. There's millions of WordPress sites out there. If you're trying to become a WordPress developer, there's definitely jobs out there for those people, especially if you're looking to start your own business. So you have a lot of options there, and you should never stop learning to code. All right, so thanks everybody. I'm going to end it. Oh, Cronus, I'll get you right here. You're about to finish your associate's degree, and I'm still debating if I should go a computer science degree, but a couple of friends that I know tell me it's a waste of time. What's your opinion? Definitely computer science degrees are not a waste of your time. I did a video on this earlier, how I said that computer science and getting any sort of degree is kind of like having an unfair advantage in life, because throughout your life, you're going to have some businesses and some places you want to work at that really want you to have a degree, and then you're going to have some places that value experience more. But definitely when you're starting, having a computer science degree will be an advantage for you. You're going to have the doors open up quite a bit more often. The university itself actually has programs in place. At least a good university should help you try to get a job. They have contacts. You can work with the staff there. They have career fairs. And the experience of going to college is really something awesome. So once again, thanks guys. I'm going to end it here and take care. Bye. Bye.